Hello and welcome to my 8th video on VisualBasic.net. In this video, I'll be talking about the simple controls that can be added to your forms. So let's get started. I'm going to be showing you an example so you don't need to follow along. In your toolbox, you'll find all of these great controls that you can add to your form. However, it's important that you know how they work. I'm not going to go down the entire list, but only the most important ones, to save time. And also not to bore you. I'm pretty much just gonna ignore the pointer up top because it's pretty much useless and move on to the button. The button is probably one of the most useful things you'll ever use. Well, more or less. To add the button to your form, simply drag and drop it. Or you can resize it however you want. You can add many different events to your button. However, the click event is the default since most of the time your button will be clicked. After that, we have the checkbox. Checkbox is really simple. It's basically just a box that you can check off. For example, if I were to run this program, I can actually click on the checkbox like so. And as you can see, I can check it off and then get rid of it. Now, if you wanted to code the checkbox, you can double click it. You'll go to the checkbox check changed. If the check state has been changed, for example, if you checked it off, then this code will be fired up. I'm going to skip the checked list box until we learn about the list box first. The color dialog is for selecting a color and then it'll give it back to you through the code. This is very useful and we'll go through it in later videos. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on from the color dialog, and next we're going to look at the combo box. A very good example of the combo box would be in your code editor. That is a combo box, and a very good and useful one at that. So going back here, we can add a combo box by simply dragging and dropping it onto your form. As you can see, it looks very similar to the one we saw. If you wanted to add things, you can go to the triangle and click Edit Items. Let's put in some things in there. There you go. Now if you were to run this program, you'll see that inside the combo box we have YouTube, subscribe, and like. Next off, let's talk about the context menu strip. The context menu strip is basically that menu that comes up when you right click on something. For example, you have view code, lock controls, properties. You can add your own context menu strip and then add it to your form very easily. Most controls have a button to or a property that you can change. If you add in a context menu strip into here, and we didn't put anything into it, but that won't matter. We have a combo box, so we can go down here until we find context menu strip and put in context menu strip 1. However, we don't want that since we're going to get rid of all these anyways. After the context menu strip, we're going to go down until we find the date time picker. Date time picker is basically a little calendar from which you can select your date and time. Very simple. I want to skip a bunch of these now until we go down to folder browser dialog and font dialog. These two are pretty much similar like the color dialog except that they have different purposes. Next, we have the group box. A group box is a collection of objects that you can put inside. For example, we can drag and drop a button inside the group box. The button is now part of the group box, so if you were to move around the group box, the button would go with it. It's not part of the form, so it's not independent, it's dependent to the group box. If you deleted the group box, it would get deleted as well. Let's move on. And then we're going to move on to the label. A label is probably also one of the most used. The label is simply text that you can add to your form. So let's put in something here. Now, if we take a look back at our label, it has changed. These are extremely helpful for putting in simple text on your forms, for information or really anything. Next, I'm going to skip down link label and then go down to the list box. A list box is a list of items. So you can add stuff into here by clicking on the triangle, edit items. As you can see, these things have been added, and you can find out what was clicked. If you click on this, there are events inside. You can add events to your code so that whenever you click it, something will happen. So let's say if you clicked on subscribe, it'll send you somewhere or do something. So that's the list box, basically just a list. A checked list box is basically just a list box except with check marks available. Next, let's move on to the panel. The panel is basically like the group box except that it doesn't have a border or the text on top, as you can see up there. On the group box it says group box 1, however it doesn't say that. So you have that dotted border. The dotted border does not appear, as you can see here. If we run the program, it's actually invisible. Now let's put in a picture box into this. A picture box is basically just a picture. You can add a picture into there by clicking choose image from here. And you can either import one from here, or you can go through your resources folder. I don't have anything in my resources, so I can't show you anything there. Let's get rid of this one, and this one as well. Next, let's move on to the progress bar. A progress bar shows you your progress. For example, if you have ever copied files before, you probably know exactly what this is. Now you can change the value by going to the value property. Right now the maximum is at 100, so 50 would be only half of it. Let's go ahead and delete this now. Next we have the radio button. Radio button is kind of like the checkbox except that when you have multiple radio buttons, you can only have one selected at a time. So watch. If I select radio button 1, radio button 2 cannot be selected. Only one can be selected. But this can be changed if you put one inside a group box. Let's say we have another set inside the group box. If I have radio button 4 enabled, I can also have radio button 1 enabled. Same thing for a panel. The rich text box is kind of like a text box except a lot more advanced. A good example of a rich text editor would be this is WordPad. As you can see, you have some cool features like justification and also things like font. Alright, so let's go down again. After the rich text box, which I've lost now, there we go, we have a save file dialog. A save file dialog is basically another dialog for saving files, and you can code this in later. We'll talk about it in later videos. Tab control is pretty simple. It's meant for tabs. I'm not going to go through it too much. Alright, so text box. It's pretty simple. You've probably used it before, and if you haven't, then you haven't watched my videos on my Visual Basic stuff before. A timer is exactly what you think it is. It basically keeps the time, and you can add code once it's done. Now let's talk about the tooltip. The tooltip is basically what happens when you hover over something like the rich text box. In this case, it says rich text box version blah blah blah, all that. The tree view is basically what you see in the Solution Explorer, but don't worry about it too much. Let's move on to the web browser control. The web browser control is basically a mini web browser inside your program. It's based on Internet Explorer. However, it's not all that great. It's really buggy and frankly it's very old. And I wouldn't really use it much unless you want to put a lot of work into it and fix up the problems with it. Alright, so that's it for this video. If you like it, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. See you next time.